introduction may happen a little bit later on. In the meantime, just try to bear with us. My name is Dr. Danka Tamburic. I am a reader in cosmetic science here at London College of Fashion. I am also a member of the Center for Sustainable Fashion, which is actually organizing this talk as a center. I am delighted to start this second series of talks organized here by our visiting professor, Dr. Paul Metz. The first series of talks happened last year. We call it Skin Deep. And I just wanted to ask, once everybody's in, those who have attended any of the last series of talks, hands up. I would like to see how many. Okay, well, not that many. So it's a lot of new faces, which is very nice to see. Okay, so Dr. Paul Metz is actually a principal scientist at this multinational international corporation, Procter & Gamble. So this is his day job, and he's got two professorships, not just one. He's a visiting professor of the University of the Arts London, as well as of the University of London School of Pharmacy. And we are obviously very, very thankful to him to organizing this second series, which we decided to call Better Lives. And this is to fit within the mission of the Center for Sustainable Fashion. So I'm going to just tell you very briefly what our center is about before I introduce Professor Metz. The Center for Sustainable Fashion at London College of Fashion connects research, education, and business to support, inspire, and create innovative approaches to fashion. It provokes, challenges, and questions the fashion status quo. Well, this talk is going to do just that. Through collaboration, we design transforming solutions that balance ecology, society, and culture. So before anything else, I would really like to stop here and introduce Professor Paul Metz, who will in turn then introduce our speaker, Dr. Mason.
Super. Well, good evening, everybody. It's fantastic to see you all. As Danka said, last year it was my privilege to organise a series of lectures called Skin Deep, where, quite frankly, it was a chance to indulge myself and the audience in a quite eclectic series of talks that covered all aspects of skin, biology, chemistry, physics, psychology, and I loved it, and I know that some of you came last year loved it as well. So this year we've taken it forward, and Phil Sams, a colleague here at the college, and I were discussing what would make a good lecture series, and our consensus was from last year, an emerging theme was the importance of skin, this skin, but also, don't forget, our second skin. We higher animals, or ourselves humans, choose to put on ourselves in terms of our sense of esteem and sense of well-being and sense of self-worth. And so it's my pleasure to introduce actually a very good friend of mine, Dr. Julian Mason, who I call Jules, who, to both our surprise, has done surprisingly well in life. And is a consultant old-age psychiatrist with Berkshire Healthcare Trust. Seriously, Jules is an expert in his field and, by his own admission, seeks to promote awareness of the issues associated with aging. So no more ado, please welcome Jules to the stage. Thanks very much.
Giving lectures is something that generates anxiety and worries in the lecturer. And awareness of your own emotional state is something that psychiatrists are very good at. We've taught it throughout our training to be extremely conscious of what is worrying us and what we're taking with us to see our patients or into the lecture theatre. And you worry about things like, do I know where to go? Have I got the right day? Have I brought my memory stick with me? But this is the first time coming to the London College of Fashion, the first time where I'm genuinely and really concerned about what I should wear. And Dreadful first slide. Really, really sorry about it. However, we just have to set out some assumptions which I'm afraid we're not going to be able to discuss very fully. We just need to set a definition for self-esteem. And it's broadly defined as referring to the degree to which an individual values and accepts him or herself. Now, what I can tell you, and I come with great authority as a consultant psychiatrist to say that low self-esteem has been associated with a host of negative life outcomes, including misuse of alcohol, unhappiness, depression, and worsened recovery after illness. High self-esteem has been associated with positive characteristics such as initiative, strong coping skills, persistence in the face of challenges, happiness, longevity. And in geriatric research, it has been demonstrated that self-concept plays a key role in the model of successful ageing. And it predicts independence, cognitive stability, and general health in old age. I'm afraid I only have 40 minutes, and I just can't give you the background to all that, and we just have to just take it from me. I'm a psychiatrist, that this is true. And key to it is the 10-point Rosenberg scale, plus an additional bonus factor of dealing with your own failings. That in fact, one of the things that we do, you know, that self-esteem is about is actually a bit of self-acceptance and dealing with things when they go wrong and it's your fault. But the reason I'm here, and this is, I hold a candle for this topic and I hold a candle for these issues, is it protects against depression. And as a psychiatrist, I spend most of my time treating people with mental disorders, but I also give a certain amount of my time, very committed to the prevention of depression and psychiatric disorders in the elderly. And therefore, if you can age well with good self-esteem, this is very important. And what I'm going to try and persuade you today is that the fashion industry, the fashion services, if they can engage well with the elderly, you are actually doing a very significant socially responsible act, because you will be contributing to mental well-being in this population. I just want to get the boring bit a little bit out of the way, because of course this is a scientific lecture, and we have to sort of suggest that there is some evidence to support what I'm saying. And here are the key references, and I just want to take you through them. At the top there, the Graham et al. Reference from 1985. As a psychiatrist, I'm very much a realist, and this paper showed that in fact, the more attractive you are as you age, the more your self-esteem is. There is a distinct correlation between physical appearance and self-esteem. And though we sort of don't like that, it's sort of a slightly uncomfortable finding, let me assure you it's backed up by many studies that come out of people who are injured, all sorts of disfigurements, and the aging process itself damages people's self-esteem. And what this study showed was that good use of cosmetics, properly applied, actually greatly assisted and significantly assisted people with the aging process. The Baker and Grinkart paper is very interesting because it's very modern, very recent in 2009, and it's a very nice descriptive piece of research showing that aging produces serious challenges and changes to people's perception of themselves and of their body and their appearance. And there's a greater emphasis on function rather than appearance. But it's something that is still very much there, and it really dismisses the belief that elderly people don't care about how they look or they don't care how their body functions. In fact, they do. Both genders equally are concerned about it. But if you ask an older person, what do you think of your body, they're much more likely to be thinking about how their body functions rather than necessarily its appearance. But it's the appearance in relation to its function. I can still walk, I stand up straight, I haven't got a huge tummy, you know, my skin looks okay. Dumas et al. In 2005 looked at older women's relations to bodily appearance. And this is, again, a very important paper because it demonstrated quite clearly about cultural expectations that people carry into old age. And it's very important for us to understand that older people actually have quite fixed and stable views of how they should appear, depending on their upbringing, depending on their experiences through adult life, and often usually referring to their socioeconomic status through their early and middle adult lives. Jung and Miller looked, just through a postal survey, looked at the factors of dress affecting self-esteem in older females. And this was quite an interesting paper because, again, it confirmed that people were very concerned about their appearance, even past the ages of 60, 70, into 80s. They weren't so concerned about this word fashion, but they were concerned about how they looked. And finally, Umstead et al., very recent paper, just has to remind ourselves that, in fact, trumping the clothing thing is actually your health, fitness, and your weight. So though I'm here trying to encourage you to think about older people and think about how they dress and think about the cosmetics they may wish to buy, it does actually in the hierarchy of protecting against mental health does fall a little bit below things like fitness. Can you walk properly? What's your exercise tolerance like? What's your body mass index? Yes. Does everybody know body mass index? Yeah, that's okay. And these things are actually extremely important. However, they feed into the same basic concept that I appear healthy. Now, this is a key issue, is what percentage of the population are in fact in the 60 plus age group. And it's 30% of the adult population now is over the age of 60. The grey market in Britain, and certainly in most of Western Europe, is the only growing market. That in fact the number of people entering the 60 plus age group is far larger than the number of children being born. Also, that the baby boomers throughout the world are now occupying the new middle class, that in fact they are people with disposable income. And just a simple fact, 1,500 people every day in the United Kingdom celebrate their 65th birthday. And in the United States it's 6,000. And it also affects their consumer spending. So 50% of disposable income in the United Kingdom belongs to the over 50s. And in the 55 plus age group in the United Kingdom, they spent £276 billion on health and well-being and their appearance and what they chose to wear. They are spending a huge amount of money. More women than ever over the age of 60 are financially independent and will go out and spend their own money freely without concern or making reference to anybody else. And we know that they have a given set of values. They particularly like choice. They're very keen on accessible goods and products, very keen on autonomy. They want to feel that they're very much independent and that whatever it is they select to buy, they do so because they want it. They're independent, very concerned with their health and well-being, very concerned with being relaxed and comfortable. So their choices around clothing or their choices around what they will have for their house is very much more concerned with being comfortable and at ease, very concerned about quality and housing and environmental control. They want to be in a very pleasant environment a lot of the time, and that includes their skin, and as I'm now going to learn to call it, their second skin, their clothing. Also, internet usage is high. Do not believe, and I meet a lot of elderly people. I just meet elderly people all the time. They use the internet. They're very computer savvy. They're not put off by it at all. And in fact, they quite like it, because one of the things they often find in the retail experience is that they get a bit pushed around. They're a little bit slower. They're not acting maybe as quickly. And the internet, of course, means that they can browse, look at things, and think about things at their own pace. You know, if they need to go and have a wee, they can go and have a wee and come back without any concerns. Now, we need just to look at ageing quite quickly to get ourselves in context. And I've used a sort of fusion here of Erikson, Freud and Piaget, just to give us a quick view of ageing. So from birth to 18 months, you've got this phase, trust versus mistrust, where everything in the world is either a threat or it's something to comfort them, and it's very much the oral phase. By early childhood, from 18 months to 3 years, particularly as you're going through the anal phase and you're controlling your bowel movements, children are already trying to understand that having clean clothes, you haven't pooed your pants, is actually very significant. And they are learning from that moment that in fact their external appearance is very relevant to the way they are treated. In the play age, from 3 to 5 years, this initiative versus guilt, when they're dealing with the Oedipal conflict, not classically, we've slightly moved away from Freud's view that it was just about boys fighting their fathers to who will have the mother, more to an idea that you're actually in conflict with one of your parental figures for the affection of the other one, but at the same time trying to get a secure attachment, that children start to realise that, oh, if I appear nice, oh, mummy likes my dress, daddy likes my shorts and the way I wear this, they're starting to very quickly appreciate that their clothing and the way they look and the way they appear gains them approval. And so they already have a sense that clothing is very important. 6 to 12 years, we've got industry versus inferiority, and this is a key phase when children become fashion aware and very acutely aware of what they should be wearing at school and what their mates are wearing, and are they in or are they out. And this comes in very much in the second sort of phase of childhood as they go into senior school, identity versus role confusion. You know, am I conforming to mummy and daddy? No, I want to be part of the gang and look a bit cool. But they are even now becoming very, very concerned about how they look. Then you get into young adulthood, and it's really all about engaging with the opposite sex, intimacy and solidarity, trying to find a mate, versus being a bit aloof, a bit cool, a bit isolated, and you're wrestling with those two conflicts, and that's very much influencing about dress choice. Then we come into middle adulthood. By this time, you're starting to have your children, and you've got generativity versus self-absorption or stagnation. And people now are concerned about perpetuating their culture, transmitting their values onto their children, and will again be telling their children what to wear, showing examples of what they wear, how they appear. And this is very much part of the teaching and the message that is given and that is perpetuated. And finally, we get into the period that we're wanting to talk about today, which is late adulthood, and this sense of integrity versus despair. And what I'm trying to persuade you is that fashion, clothing, cosmetics helps push elder people from despair into a more integrated sense of themselves. And that in fact, if they appear reasonable, well turned out, this is part of them maintaining their mental well-being. Having given an age classification like that, we just need to discuss its pros and cons. It is very useful in the context we're in now to explore the principles and consider strategies of dealing with age groups. And it's very helpful to consider populations such as the baby boomers, the Generation Xers, and the Grey Generation. However, we have to warn ourselves about avoid using them to make assumptions about an individual. So if you are planning what clothing you want to sell, design, make, it is reasonable to think about the market. However, when you're selling or engaging with an individual, or letting someone express their choice, it can be very dangerous to assume, oh, you're 68, you fall into this age group, I can make all sorts of assumptions about you just because you're this age. So there are actually, you have to balance this sort of sweeping statements about populations, and you have to always consider the individual and also consider the population that they come from or the population that you're just trying to describe. And it is a bit of a fine balancing act. And I don't want people to go away with the idea that we can just clump all old people together and make sweeping statements and in a couple of paragraphs have described every single old person. In fact, it just doesn't work like that. They're all individuals, own feelings, thoughts and styles. But taken together as a population, you can actually make some statements about them that are very useful and helpful to guide our thinking. Aging presents a major existential challenge. And by that, it makes you question your very existence and the quality of your existence. And we know this, that 90% of older adults are not looking forward to old age. And that basically means once you hit 40 and the flush of youth has gone and the first creak has appeared maybe in the knees, the back, the optician has told you you've got to get the magnification up on your glasses, the body is starting to head south. And what happens is that we say, oh God, I'm going to get old. And yes, you are going to get old. And there are major changes in your body and mind. And the great thing that happens is that you realise as people age that you want a greater emphasis on function rather than appearance. You want to be able to demonstrate you're still functioning well. You, though, still are very concerned about how you function, that you're still capable. Particular preoccupations are with the skin, particularly the skin around the eyes, the appearance of your hands, legs and teeth. Very, very important in studies of older people and what they really worry about in their experience. These are the, if you like, the real headline acts that people are very concerned about. Accompanying this is a major challenge because by the time you get into 60 plus, you usually have suffered some sort of personal loss in your life. You'll have experienced a significant degree of suffering, either for you, your loved ones, maybe even your children. And you'll be starting to think about impending death. You'll have lived more of your life is behind you, and there's less of your life in front of you. Also, there's marked regret for lost opportunity. You know that things have passed you by and that chances have already gone. Therefore, it is a little bit of a melting pot, a little bit of a breeding ground for depression and for people getting miserable and getting sad. However, there is some good news. Certain qualities do improve with age, and if people are going to engage with an older market and older people and try and persuade them to part with their money for their products, I think it's very important to understand that their ability to reflect is better, ability to see the whole picture. They're much better able to consider the rational and the emotional and have a really good understanding of pleasure as it relates to them as an individual. Very clear in their reasoning, not necessarily quicker in their reasoning, but clearer in it, and more comfortable with shades of grey. Things don't have to be black or white. So what will guarantee us, being well in our old age? And what we know is that there's a list of things that will predict that people will age well and they will experience the 60 plus years as being, valuable and positive. The first thing is that they are motivated to age well. People who are in denial, avoiding it, who are sort of, oh, I'm not getting old, do not do well. But people who say, yes, I am going to get old, there are going to be changes, I'm going to have to make some adjustments, but I'm going to make the most of it. That is the most important factor. People who remain capable and independent and set themselves goal and have a purpose and are determined not to be a burden do well. People whose older age experience is consistent with their previous, particularly their early and middle adult lives, and that their cultural background and concept of self isn't greatly challenged. We know that people who suffer major cultural transplantation or sort of cultural moves in later life really do struggle. The quality of their social support is very important. Previous experience and role models, i.e., had they met somebody who they look back and say, yes, I remember granddad or uncle or auntie who seemed to age well, or a parent who aged well and dealt with aging well, these people do better. Also, if they themselves are acknowledged and valued. And this is actually the key point, is that in fact, if you are acknowledged and recognised, not as a sort of spillover or something that is no longer of value, then in fact it does your self-esteem better. What is fascinating about this list is it's exactly the same list that protects against depression, copes with stress, copes with major life events, and these have all been looked at again and again and again for people who've been under very, very stressful situations. And it's the same list that keeps on cropping up, that these list of skills or capabilities or qualities are actually the things that actually help you cope with life. Now, let's have a look at this chap. What I need to explain to you is why is it, by the time you hit the 60 plus age group, is it so ingrained inside you about your appearance, and that it is highly unlikely that you are going to lose a sense of how you appear. And I'm going to try and explain this, first of all with this picture, and then try and explain it to you looking at a bit of neuropsychology and neuroanatomy and a bit of neurochemistry, to try and show you that in fact it is just because of the way the brain is set up, it is just not surprising that in fact your industry exists, that in fact we are concerned about our external appearance and what it means to us. Just look at this picture. This is a man in his 70s who is a merchant banker, and he doesn't dress like this when he goes to work. However, on Carnival Day, he allows himself to dress like this. So the first thing we have to explain is, why is it that we as humans can transform the way we look depending on the social context we are in? Also, he is resorted to make him appear sort of stunning and engaging by using peacock feathers, which actually clues us into it is evolutionarily established. It's in the most primitive parts of our brain that in fact our external appearance becomes very important to us. External appearance is not something that is evolutionarily new. Actually, it's very, very old. Millions of years before human beings appeared. And in the tiny, tiny peacock brain, compared to the human brain, there is plenty of brain cells given over to making sure and aware of how you appear. So let us consider which bits of the brain are involved. And first of all, we need to consider the occipital lobe. Because we're talking about appearance and the vision, we need to understand what happens to visual information. How much of the brain do we need to make sense of someone's appearance and to make sense of our own appearance as we look in the mirror, or make sense of our appearance as we imagine others might be seeing us? The occipital lobe is where visual information goes. It goes from the eyes, your inner portions of your eyes cross over, so you get a representation left and right in both sides of the brain. But most importantly, from the occipital lobe, we get to the posterior portion of the parietal lobe, which is just here. And there's a major tract coming out of the occipital lobe into the posterior portion of the parietal lobe, and this allows you to make judgments like the colour is blue, the colour is red, the skirt is above the knees, below the knees, the trousers are too small, too big. All those issues that you look at, and we do it all the time when we look at somebody and we assess what they're wearing, or we look at ourselves and choose what we're going to wear. We look in the mirror and we look at the appearance of our skin. You need the parietal lobe to make sense of the colour, the perspective, the proportion of everything. Then you need the middle inferior gyri of your temporal lobe to give it semantic meaning. Now this is extremely important for social interaction, because without this area of your brain you can't talk to anybody, because without this area of the brain you wouldn't be able to say jacket, trousers, shirt, boot cut, short weekend, mini skirt, long skirt, nice hairstyle, wrinkles, all these words that are in common parlance and are the very meaning of our interchange about our appearance, all is done in this area of the temporal lobe. And then finally, the key area of it all, the prefrontal cortex, the thing that the biggest bit of the human brain, which has pushed us way beyond all the other primates. This is where you make your judgment of whether your appearance is socially appropriate, whether your appearance is provocative, whether it is demure, whether it is smart, casual, whether it is expensive, cheap. To all these issues, all these labels that you put on things and we put on things for ourselves and other people is all done in the prefrontal cortex. And can you see how much of the brain is given over to making sense of visual information? And that brain doesn't suddenly disappear as you get old. It's there, it's wired in, and it's very much part of it. And it's heavily linked to other parts of the brain. Also for tactile information, we've got the post-central gyrus and parietal lobe. So not only are we looking at what we see, we're feeling what we wear, and a big area of your brain is letting you know that you're quite comfortable. Your trousers aren't too tight, you're not too cold, oh, it's a bit itchy. You know, that is always analysing everything. If, oh, God, I cycled here and I'm a bit sweaty and damp. You know, your tactile information about your clothing is extremely important to you, and it comes here. And again, that information in the same way is transmitted particularly into your temporal lobes and to your frontal lobes to make sense of it. However, this is the key bit. It is heavily, heavily linked in with your memories, your emotions, and just because it's in the same part of the brain, we'll just mention your aroma. There is an emotional pacemaker which sits in your most primitive part of your brain, and it's just here. It's called the periaqueductal grey matter. It's got several major nuclei, and this is driving your mood, and it sets your mood all the time. It's your sort of basic level of mood, and it's certainly disorders in here that people have biological depression. However, it's very tightly associated with this second area referred to as the limbic system and with our memory system, which is just here on the inner surface of the temporal lobe. And what's important is that every time you see a jacket or a piece of clothing or a trouser or a skirt, you quickly give it an emotional label and you say, oh, that looks good, that would look good on me, that would make me feel good. No, not right for me. Or you look at yourself and, oh, that's wrong. Or you look at somebody else, they should be wearing that. Or, oh, yeah, that looks good on you, that suits you. And all the time you are feeding your cognitive information into this very quickly reacting emotional system here called your limbic system, which fits in with your memory system because you have to recall everything. So you have to recall things like mini skirts a little bit provocative, or, you know, plunging chests look provocative, maybe we shouldn't be wearing those, or you look very demure. You know, you have to remember all this stuff all the time, and you have to access it, and the brain is deliberately linking it in, and it's this area of the brain that is modified by your cultural expectation, and by the time you hit 60 plus, it's pretty stable and isn't going to change that much. Also, just by coincidence, in man, because we're not a keen-scented animal, even though we spend, how much money do we spend on cosmetic aroma? It's billions, isn't it? But we're not actually a keen-scented animal, and the area of our brain that smells is tiny. However, it links very particularly into memory, and we recall smells extremely well, and they evoke very powerful emotional feelings. And in fact, basically all your smell information just goes straight to your emotional system, and that's why we use it, because it's just wired straight in to this area of the brain here. So it's absolutely understandable that elderly people, when they hit old age, are still desperate, even more desperate, to try and look good and appear good, and it's going to affect them and the way they look, because they are in this existential battle with the aging process, and because they've got this hardwired circuit that just doesn't disappear. They don't, you get given a new brain when you're 60 and you're sort of all relaxed about it. No, it's all in there, and it isn't going to change. So we know appearance and presentation will reflect our mood, it reflects how we value ourselves, relationship with the world, social capability. But most importantly, and this is highly relevant, it helps us establish constructive and collaborative relationships. This is very important to understand this. That's why when I actually did decide what I was going to wear to the lecture theatre, I didn't come in my cycling gear, and I didn't quite come in haute couture, and I thought, well, I'll just get it about right. And looking at what Paul wore, I think I got it just about. I'm perhaps not quite as fashionista as Paul today, but I'm not bad. But what is also what we know about how the brain works and what external appearance is, and particularly in the elderly, is it's about capability. In fact, what the message we're trying to give over to people is our level of capability. And we've evolved a highly sophisticated approach to appearance and presentation that allows us to adapt and to cope. And it demonstrates that we are capable, competent, and full of vitality and energy. And that is actually the message that mentally healthy people are actually trying to communicate with the way they dress. And that equally means that you wear something relaxed with familiar people of an evening when you're in your own house, and you dress appropriately when it's called for, because you know and understand what's going on around you, because you are capable of coping and adaptation, and your brain is set up to do that for you. Now, does this mean that in fact what I should do is take all my patients and all elderly people in Berkshire and drive them over to the Milan Prada shop, and that is it there, and just get them to dress in that and they're going to feel great? The answer is no, because cosmetics and fashion highly relate to your social network. Do you remember I showed you that picture of the temporal lobe and gives you a semantic meaning, i.e. you can describe what you wear? It's very important that you have that, because what you wear is a major topic of conversation and mutual interest. I have been married twice, I've lived with 2 or 3 other women, and there is one topic of conversation that all women seem to have is about their knickers. And they sort of talk about this, where they buy them, where they purchase them. With men, it seems to be jeans and boots, or training shoes. And it's a very important way of linking with other people about what we wear, where we choose to get it, or what cosmetics we buy, what hairdresser we go to. It is a major and very, very important way of linking in. So in fact, taking all the elderly people of Berkshire to Prada is going to be inappropriate, because those of them who live in the socially deprived areas of Slough and Reading are going to feel completely out of place going to the Lidl on Saturday morning dressed in haute couture, because it's going to stop them engaging socially appropriately. What's also very important is that cosmetics, fashion, allows us to make quality ties to other people that are universally endorsed and central to optimal living. And that's why we dress in a way that sort of matches and mirrors and goes along with what other people are wearing. And in fact, I would argue that looking around this room, we're pretty much of a sort of even spread of clothing here. Nobody's way out of the extremes. Also, there's good evidence that fashion and cosmetics can bridge the generation gap, and this is very important for older people. That if you look half decent when you're 60 plus, you can actually deal with the fears, because this is the thing, is that your daughter, your granddaughter, your niece looks at you and says, gosh, you know, am I going to look like that? But in fact, if you look half decent and you're wearing something nice, your daughter or granddaughter might say, oh, where'd you got that? That's nice. That looks very good. And there is a bridging of the generation gap by fashion and by what you wear and the cosmetics you choose. And it's actually very, very important. It's shown actually to be very useful in bridging relationships. Now, as people get older, though, they get some heavily bad cognitions. They sort of think very badly of themselves. 45% of people over the age of 65 perceive themselves to have a disability. I have lost my beauty, I've lost my value, I have lost my role. Also, they complain about consumer exclusion, that 46% of the 60 plus age group feel that retail is not for them. They describe themselves as the spillover. Oh, shops are for the young people. And that there is a collective worshipful attitude towards youth, with a sense of ageism in advertising. And this is bred by the idea possibly that the advertising market feel that if they can capture people when they are young, they don't need to worry about advertising to them when they're old, because they'll stick with the product or stick with the brand, though in fact there's no evidence to support that. But it's a two-way street. More mature adults also exclude themselves. They are less tolerant of depersonalised market experiences. Older people, and I include myself in this, at the tender age of 47, I just get annoyed when people trot out the same stuff. They don't look me in the eye, they don't talk to me about what I want, they clearly intend to sell me something that I'm not remotely interested in, and you just think, God, I'm not coming back to this shop. Something I seemed to tolerate much easier when I was younger. Also, older people are much more resistant to have their opinion changed, and therefore maybe they just look at advertising and go, what's the point, you know, you're trying to sell me something, I'm not really that interested. They also find the argument style, the hard sell, the functional benefits that try and persuade people to buy things or buy clothing are much less effective. And in fact, advertising strategies to the older age group need to be much more subtle and much more engaging. However, clearly, older people are still out there, enjoying themselves, having a good time. 72 years old, our friends here. And the perceptions and projections that turn off the older market is that people believe that you get sick, you lose interest in intimacy, you're unwilling to try anything new, you lose control of your bodily functions, you can't function in the workplace, you can't understand technology, no social life, you don't pull your weight, you can't even make a decision. And these things, they sense, you're thinking this about me, you're telling me this, I don't want to have anything to do with your product, with what you're trying to sell me. So how do we age well? How is it done? And actually, though it's nice to come and talk to you guys, the person who's most important and most relevant to aging well is actually the individual. And it's, the fashion industry and the cosmetic industry can try as hard as it likes to temper the ravages of aging. However, if you're going to age well and you're going to maintain mental healthy, you have to do it at the right sort of age. And a good age to do it is in your 40s, to start thinking and reflecting about what happens to you when you get older, and just having a few thoughts about how you're going to prepare and make yourself ready. Not get preoccupied, negative, nihilistic, and oh my God, it's all going to turn to pot and I'm going over to Switzerland to end my life. It's not like that. It's actually just thinking, well, how am I going to make the most of my life? And how do we address those negative cognitions, this sort of disappointment, this worries? And late life well-being is how you enter it and how you respond to it. And in fact, the most important things to do are the similar things to avoid having a heart attack and a stroke, keep your weight down, particularly your waist measurement, to be fit as you can be, and all these things actually predispose to good aging. Also to be realistic, and in this concept of selective optimization with compensation, this idea that in fact you try and optimize the things that are still strong and are still there, and you compensate for the losses. So the eyesight isn't as good, you don't come first in the running races anymore. However, you still go and take part in the seniors event, or as I go and take part, called the Old Crumblies, my age group now, in my once a year cycling and running race. They call me the Old Crumblies, and I feel good about it. But the question to the fashion business, the fashion world, is, are you going to patronise me or are you going to support me? Old people, and this actually then now raises the real challenge to engaging with this market, engaging with old people, is that they want to be acknowledged and loved and pampered and, oh, you're important, but they don't want to be told that they're old. And it's the age-old catch-22, is how do you actually engage somebody without mentioning the elephant in the room? But I'm not an advertising guru, and I'm not part of the industry, so I don't have to deal with this. But it's important this concept of seamless accessibility reinforces personal value. That in fact, you don't, as you age and get older, you don't get put off. That it seems as though you can keep going to the same shop, the same products, and you still think, oh, actually, no, this is still relevant for me, it's still important for me. I'm now 40, I'm now 50, and I'm now 60. Also, you know, industry thinking about better products will make people better valued. And late adulthood should not be just about should be about thriving and enjoying yourself, and not just about surviving. And so people should be out, taking part in what's going on in their communities, enjoying themselves, and feeling good about themselves even when they pass the age of 80. Affirming role models and images. And now there's a good book by Rowan Kahn, Successful Aging. And what's really important is that old people want to be portrayed as being capable of making choices, generally capable, and that sense that they made an effort. And that is why the older generation will continue to look after their external appearance. They will continue to try and keep their skin looking as young as possible, because in fact they want to be perceived as having made an effort and not just having completely given up. Oh, that's a photo I'm not supposed to show. No, we can go back, can we? Just for a little bit, okay. And that in fact there are some images out there that show older people as looking reasonable, still looking attractive, still looking like they can be intimate and enjoy their lives. This picture, I'm not so sure, but I liked it. But I'm not an advertising guru, so it may put some of you off, but I liked it because he did look quite cool to me, and he's advertising of the original dandy style, Orazio. Just a couple more slides, very interesting research about makeup and falls. World Congress of Gerontology, April 2009, that putting on lipstick and mascara boosts balance and coordination by acting as a type of stretching. And in fact, they had this two group, and in fact, good evidence. I'm not going to bore you with the neuroanatomy, but there is good evidence that the movement, because you're looking in the mirror, constantly eye, 1, 2, up, down, all those movements are actually very good at balancing. It actually makes sense, and it's supported. And in fact, the balancing movements that people are given, like with vertigo, are very similar to the movements that women use to put on their makeup. Also, one of the things that of course happens in the aging process is that there are many eye conditions that affect, you know, the lens itself, the cornea, then as you go back, the retina, all suffer from a multitude, unfortunately, of eye conditions. And therefore, there is some, but there needs to be more, good research about putting on makeup for the visually impaired, because that is something that affects older people. And it's very good, as we showed in our original paper, that in fact putting makeup on the elderly is good for them. How do you engage and persuade people? Well, it's very important to be credible. Persuade them that they're in some behavioural control. Address the illusion of invulnerability. What this means is that some people are going around saying, well, I'll never get old. I don't have to address that issue. But in fact, persuade people, in fact, yes, you do age, but you can modify the process a little bit. And you can do something to your skin, where you choose your clothes, can actually make you appear quite good. Because in fact, the invulnerability thing is really about denial and avoidance. Canalization, use pre-existing values. We know that older people, as they don't suddenly become old overnight. They've gradually gone in, and they are still believing that they are valuable and worthwhile, and we should channel that. Fit with prevailing norms. It is now the prevailing norm. Older people in their 60s, 70s have money, want to live, and it is the prevailing norm now that they want to engage with looking good and feeling good. And it's very important that they get the same message, that the TV advert, what they see on the internet, and what they meet over the counter is the same thing. And engage them personally. So when they have the opportunity to choose clothes or choose products, they have a sense that they are really making a choice and that they are contributing to that choice. But avoid telling and selling lies. We know that the forever young attitude actually doesn't exist. It panders to our most primitive defences of denial and avoidance. Nobody stays young forever. And we know from the studies about people with personality disorders who age that the narcissistic preoccupation with the myth of eternal youth leads to people who are less extravagant, they're less open to experience, they're less agreeable and conscientious, less in control, and the reduced desire to get more out of life. So people who believe that a product will keep them looking like they did when they were 25, you know, in the end you're going to be damaging, potentially damaging, and it's not good. But if you can persuade them and get them to agree and understand that you can modify that experience of aging, that is a very good thing. And it's very marked block to personal, interpersonal and societal development, because in fact it's very important for our society to understand the stages of man, the stages of life. That children must understand about getting older, and that people must, that the next generation must be prepared and must know that they themselves will age, and then so the cycle goes on. And it's very, very important to our society to appreciate that. And we shouldn't go around telling people, don't worry, I've got this potion that will keep you forever young. Just to see if you've been listening and paying attention, can anybody identify the three women on the screen? I will give you a prize if anybody can identify all three and give me their ages. Helen Mirren in the middle. Who got Debbie Harry? Oh, very good. Debbie Harry. And Raquel Welch. Does anybody get all three? Does anybody want to have a stab at their ages?
All the same age?
They're not all the same age. Two of them the same age. Helen Mirren is... Who gave me that? Helen Mirren is 66. Very good. How about the others?
Debbie Harry 64.
Not bad. And Raquel Welch? 71. 71, 66, 66. And who gave me that Raquel Welch was 71? You win the prize. And what a prize.
Photograph taken.
What's the price of Botox?
What's the prize? Some Botox. No, actually, have I lost my prize? No, I haven't. The prize is a bottle of wine, which is appropriately called Anciano. I have to warn you that one of the things that accelerates aging dramatically is the excessive use of alcohol. But feel free to come and take your prize at the end. Finally, there is a growing elderly population. They have money in their pocket. but they need to age well and stay mentally healthy. A fashion and cosmetic industry that engages with them can help them through an existentially challenging journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jules, very much. What a brilliant way to start our lecture series. I think it's seriously one of the most important talks I've heard for a long time. Why? Because most talks that you hear are with somebody else, and yet this talk is to everybody in this room, because we all face what Jules has been talking about. So thank you very much. We have a few minutes, so questions, please, for Jules. Yes, sir. Go.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Mason. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for talking about me. And I just wonder, before I ask the question, how many of us here are prepared to admit to be over 60? Well, that's quite a decent spatter. Thank you very much. But I was interested in the bit that you were talking about knowledge of appearance as being hardwired, of evolutionary value. And I wondered where knowledge of appearance via a second skin takes over from a first skin, over nudity, for example.
I think it's in that age from about 3 onwards. It's at potty training and the sort of clean nappy and the sense of appearance, but also, of course, children need to wear a second skin because they're just not warm enough. We are mammals who are deficient of fur, aren't we? And
Yes,
so
I would say clothes are for 2 reasons: cover and warmth, sex and power.
yes, and I think that it starts, doesn't it, with cover and warmth, and then the other one sort of gets tagged on. But it's incredibly, but I think it's that the brain is there. It is just wanting to learn and see how the best way to adapt and survive to the environment. And so the moment the child will realise that if I look like this or appear like this, I do better, I get a better chance at something, and usually it's parental approval, then they pick that up very, very quickly. And then it's peer. You know, children I mean, I've got a child who's 5 years old, and the competitiveness in the playground already, you know, it's about testing out your peers and checking out what you look like.
Yes, just sticking on the bottle of wine. You mentioned that alcohol does affect the actual aging process. Culturally, some people, like for example, alcohol wine is part of their daily diet. Are they at a big disadvantage to
The debate rages, and I think the numbers that we use in England, about 14 units for women, 21 for men, and 2 days off in the week, are probably pretty good. It's the excessive use. So it's if you drink the whole bottle tonight, okay, share it with a few people, and you'll be all right. And I think that's the thing, is that in fact the French have done well, and we know that the Mediterranean people do well, but it also relates to their diet and their exposure to sunlight, and the pineal gland boosts their sort of feeling of well-being.
I've just finished a study of clothing and ageing. I'd like to start one on clothing and dementia. And I'm actually broadly very sympathetic to the approach you take in relation to the role of clothing and dress in maintaining esteem and well-being in old age. But I suppose I wanted to sort of put the other side that I think needs to be put there as well, which is that the spread of fashionability to older people offers a mode of integration. I would agree on that. But it also imposes new demands and new requirements. And I think it's unrealistic to see the cosmetics industry as entirely benign, assisting us, as it were, in becoming older. I think the anti-aging cosmetic industry is a mechanism that also encourages dread and fear of aging, features it, brings it into our minds. And I think there's a very clear parallel with the kind of new perfectionism that we see younger women suffering from in relation to body disorders, the problem of a hyper-perfect visual culture around you that produces a demand that you look as fabulous as the models as I think we can see the darker side of this spread of cosmetics and clothing for older people, precisely colonising later years with new body expectations.
I think that's the anti-penultimate slide was about this, the culture of narcissism and this unhealthy narcissism, but there's a healthy and an unhealthy side to it, and all these very complex issues lie on a spectrum, and you don't want to be, on the one hand, we know that from communist societies, we know the complete obliteration of fashion, everybody wore the same thing, and you know everything was painted the same colour, and there was no choice or style for everybody. That destroyed citizenship and it made people blinking miserable. But on the other hand, as you say, if you make it an extremely competitive, you know, I've got to look like this, that's no good either, and you're just trying to pitch it somewhere in the middle. But there is nothing, I'm afraid, whether it's exercise, alcohol, sex, there's nothing where there isn't a dark extreme at both ends, and we're always trying to pitch, as was it Aristotle who said, in the happy middle ground of not too much and not too little, just right. And I think that I mean, my view is, from what I see, is that you're trying to persuade the individual to engage and to think that in fact they can age well, but trying to avoid them having, you know, ridiculous expectations about what will happen to them through the aging process, and it still remains a difficult time. I mean, the large number of my patients, unsolicited, say to me, you've got to be tough to get old, and I think that remains quite true, because a good amount of psychological toughness is invaluable, and that psychological toughness is necessary so that you can take the good out of the cosmetic world and avoid the bad. But that's the relationship. Anyone who's been married knows that, in fact, you know, you've got to, even within a marriage, you've got to have some boundaries, otherwise you get abused.
Okay, one more question. Yes, sir.
More a statement than a question, and we're talking about cosmetic industry. What makes me laugh, and I'm now in that age where I develop wrinkles, and when I see these models selling the anti-wrinkle, I mean, they haven't even seen one in their face, you know, and until the industry becomes a bit more honest and shows older women in the advert, I think it's just sheer lies they try to flog, and it's very sad, very sad.
My one remark to that is the advert with Hugh Laurie in it. And he's selling some male cosmetic, something or other, and they show his wrinkles very clearly, and I actually was quite impressed by that advert. And he sort of mocks himself a little bit, and he goes, "This is not a cliche," or something. But in fact, I thought that was a step in the right direction. However, I mean, the other thing that always makes me laugh is the selling of corsets by women who have perfect figures. You know, you got this woman who's, and you just look, you know, you don't need to wear a corset. What on earth are you wearing that for? You know, but it's the same, you know, the same old thing. But I think you're right. I would think people would be possibly more taken in and more keen to buy something because it's believable. It has credibility to it. Yeah.
With that, let's thank Dr. Mason again.